Another thing that will make this spring a unique one is a once in every 221-year event. Two different types of periodical cicadas are set to emerge at the same time. Mark Strell has a look at how they will impact plants, pets, and even your yard.
And that's how they look when they're in the ground.
Homewood arborist and landscape supervisor Brian Dorr is on cicada watch.
This is a historic event. For the first time in 221 years, we are seeing an emergence of both the 17 and the 13-year cicada.
The range of the 17-year cicada covers the northern part of the state, and the 13-year cicada's range covers the southern part of Illinois, with some overlap right in the middle near Springfield. Dorr is tracking the temperature of the soil. That's a big indicator when it comes to cicadas emerging.
Very sensitive to soil temperature, 64 degrees at about 8 inches deep. They emerge from the ground and they will go up into the trees.
His goal is to educate the public about what to expect and the impact cicadas will have.
They are not going to bite, they're not going to chew on you, they're safe for humans, they're safe for pets.
While the cicadas aren't poisonous, they are prolific, according to Katie Dana with the Illinois Natural History Survey.
The biomass is going to be incredible. What that means is that you're going to see so many cicadas. There's been estimates of up to 1.5 million cicadas in an acre.
She says that means some homeowners could see an impact on their property.
Yes, you might have to clean out your gutters. You might have to make sure that the sewer drains are uncovered.
Cicadas lay their eggs on the branches of trees, which can cause damage to some of the smaller ones.
If you have highly valued small trees on your property, you could net them and cover them to prevent the insects from egg laying into your tree, causing any minor damage.
There's nothing you can do to keep them from coming out of the ground. If they're there, they're coming out.
And of course, with cicadas emerging, expect it to be loud. And
it does get stinky too, so just to warn people, it's mostly just because they're rotting. They're rotting on the ground.
The cicadas do have some positives, like serving as a food source for animals and birds.
They're part of the life cycle, if you will. Birds are going to feed on them.
Anything from small mammals to snakes to fish to your pet dog. To other insects or spiders, right?
They can also provide a source of fertilizer as they die and break down.
Which is actually great for the soil. So it introduces a lot more nutrients back into the soil. You see a lot more plant growth in following years after a cicada emergence.
Dana says the rarity of this year's emergence even has people traveling from out of state just to check it out.
I think people are just so excited. I mean, people call this a natural wonder of the world.
If you're looking to go cicada spotting, your best bet in the Chicago area could be in your local green space.
If you go to a city park, there's, all the grass is mowed, and they're just going to go straight for those trees.
The periodical cicadas are projected to emerge in mid-May, but could come out sooner if our warm winter trend continues. Mark Strell, Fox 32 Chicago.
Up next, a look at what we're seeing when it comes to bird migration amid our warm weather, how our weather is affecting Illinois wildlife, coming up. When the temperature begins to drop, many birds begin migrating out of the Chicago area looking for warmer weather. But what happens when winter is warm? Do they stay or do they go? Our Tim McGill finds out.
Whether you know it or not, Illinois is a hub for migrating birds. Millions of them pass through the Prairie State every year thanks to Old Man River.
It's a major avenue for birds. So literally hundreds of millions of birds will fly along the Mississippi River every spring and fall migration.
Andrew Dreeland is a doctoral student in bird studies at Northern Illinois University.
The way that birds respond to migration and to weather really depends on the kind of bird that it is.
Dreeland says there are two types of migratory birds.
We can think of birds as obligatory migrants, ones that are always going to migrate to and from their breeding and wintering grounds. And then we can also think of birds that are making decisions about whether or not to migrate based on more local conditions.
Like the food supply or the weather. Dreeland says these birds, if they do migrate, usually don't go very far and are the ones most affected by warm winter temperatures.
Red-winged blackbirds, brown-headed cowbirds, and other migratory songbirds that are typically the first to come back in spring are arriving earlier.
Dreeland adds our warm winter may also be setting off cues for waterfowl, like geese and ducks, to migrate back earlier this year.
We see right now birds starting to trickle back earlier than usual.
Dr. Benjamin Van Doren is an assistant professor in animal migration biology at the University of Illinois. While some birds have already started their spring migration, others won't begin until mid-May. Either way, Van Doren says it's crucial for birds to match the timing of their migration with weather conditions.
But if the birds come back too early, there's a risk of them hitting a cold snap or a snowstorm or something that might be actually quite dangerous.
That could reduce the amount of available resources birds need for feeding and breeding.
Ultimately, this kind of climate weirding that we're seeing does create problems for bird populations and has a negative impact on birds as a whole.
Dreeland says we are seeing steep declines in most migratory bird populations in North America for a number of reasons, and climate change is one of them.
There's definitely a lot that we stand to lose with declining migratory birds. Migratory birds provide vital ecosystem services like dispersing fruits and seeds, controlling insects and other potential pest species.
Dreeland says those tasks help provide clean water, food, and other resources needed to conserve the earth. But that's not all migratory birds do.
Migratory birds can tell us not only about how our ecosystems are doing here in Illinois, but also how the northern forests and the southern jungles are all faring.
Tim McGill, Fox 32 Chicago.
One last fun fact about bird migration, you won't see much of it during the day. Van Doren says birds typically migrate overnight while we're sleeping. Up next, we're digging up some spring gardening tips, what you need to know about how the warm winter will impact your planting plans. Our warm winter this year has had many impacts, but what about when it comes to our gardens? Let's get some expert advice to help you coordinate in your planting and make sure your plants thrive. Mike Kaplan is here with the story.
Gardeners around the Chicago area are getting ready to plant, but the unusual warmth this winter could be a factor in the future of your yard.
One thing that we do get concerned about sometimes when we see these really mild winters is early dormancy break for our perennial plants.
Illinois state climatologist Trent Ford says that one worry is that the plants may get ahead of pollinators like bees as they react to those warmer temperatures.
The pollinators react more to light changes more than the temperature, so the plants, quote unquote, wake up early and begin flowering a bit earlier in response to that milder winter.
Ford says that while this mismatch may not be a major issue in just 1 year, if it's something that continues long term, there could be further consequences.
It starts to really affect the suitability range of different types of plants and animals. And that's one of the bigger impacts that a warmer winter it has had and will likely continue to have in Illinois.
So what can you do to protect your plants and adjust your gardening plans this year? Heather Sherwood with the Chicago Botanic Garden has a few tips, starting with where to plant them.
So anything closer to brickwork or sometimes even like manhole or drainage covers can act like a little microclimate, and then having really nice southern exposure is kind of ideal to keep the soil just a little bit warmer.
Sherwood also recommends that gardeners make sure they choose spots for their plants where water doesn't back up.
So if you have good drainage, you have a better likelihood of zonal, questionable plants making it through the winter.
So what else can you do to get that garden ready? Cutting back, cleaning up, and mulching, those are good places to start.
If you put something in late in the season, we have a lot of heaving going on, which is the ground freezing overnight and then everything's popping up out of the ground with a frost in the morning. So putting a nice layer of mulch on it actually helps prevent that a great deal.
And at the end of the day, Sherwood says that many plants like have built-in mechanisms to protect them against the cold.
And they have that antifreeze protein in them that allows them to grow even though everything else is frozen outside. And it is, again, for our earliest pollinators that it's so vital that we have things like this so that everybody gets a little bit of choice nectar.
Fear not, if the weather does turn colder late in the season, you can still preserve those plants by being prepared now.
Covering things with a blanket definitely helps to keep that a little bit above the killing temperatures.
The bottom line is this: it never hurts to be prepared. Take the steps now to make sure that when spring arrives, everything comes in nice and green.
Thanks so much for joining us for a look at the impact of our warm winter.